Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's program. We will be getting started in just a minute. Hang tight and we'll be right back. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for Ask Me, our educational webinar series. My name's Audra Hines, Vice President of Care Services for the ALS Association Golden West Chapter. Tonight's webinar, as well as other programs and services for caregivers, are supported by the Morris Family Caregiver Initiative. We're so grateful to the Morris family for support of this critical programming. A huge thanks to you. In honor of November being National Family Caregiver Support Month, we know that caregivers often experience physical and emotional challenges that can lead to burnout. I read a quote recently that said, there are only 4 types of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. Part of the Golden West Chapter's mission is supporting those of you who are filling this very special role for your loved ones living with ALS. Our knowledgeable care managers provide resources, support groups, and referrals to help lift and support families during critical times of need. No matter where you are in this journey, you're playing such an instrumental role in helping someone you love who needs it the most, and we honor each and every one of you. During the coming month, we invite you to check out our chapter homepage for other programming and resources that are specific to caregivers. Please visit our website at www.alsagoldenwest.org. Tonight, we're proud to host this special program on caring for the caregiver. I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Kathryn Sexson. She's the director for the Family Nurse Practitioner Program and the Associate Director for Education at the Family Caregiving Institute at the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing at UC Davis. Her teaching expertise focuses on advanced family nurse practitioner care, pathophysiology, pharmacology, acute care nursing, geriatrics, and family caregiving. Dr. Sexson has a passion for family caregivers, having been the family caregiver for both of her parents and a resource to many families. These experiences, combined with research conducted by scientists committed to improving the lives of family caregivers, have expanded her understanding of the joys and challenges of caregiving. Having lived and worked in Alaska for many years, she continues to collaborate with the National Resource Center for Alaska Native Elders on family caregiving in rural Alaska, and she serves on the board of directors for ACC Senior Services in Sacramento. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sexson.
Thank you, Audra. I appreciate that and all the hard work you and the association are doing to support caregivers. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit this evening about taking care of yourselves and how to do that, as well as answer some questions you may have. This is not an easy thing to do, and so oftentimes having multiple thoughts and multiple input can make the journey a little easier. So the 4 things that I wanted to talk with you about this evening are caring at home, and to talk a little bit about a concept called anticipatory loss, where you anticipate the losses as the disease progresses and how that actually looks and ways to address that, ways to reframe that so that it's not as devastating as it sometimes can be. And then looking at your coping strategies, ways to take a few minutes out of the day to recharge. And then finally, how to maintain your resilience, something that's always challenging to do when being a caregiver. And no matter how much you love someone or how much energy and devotion you have, caring for someone 24/7, 365 is just plain hard. Even if you have lots of positive experience, it can take its toll. Tasks can be daunting, especially as things progress and the complexity increases. And at the same time, they can be something tangible, and they can provide a feeling of security and certainty in an otherwise very uncertain process. So I have provided for you here a link to the how-to videos that are part of the AARP No Longer Home Alone initiative. And these are some of the basic things. So oftentimes when you come home from the hospital or as diseases progress, people say things to you like, just manage their oxygen, or wound care is really easy. You do 1, 2, 3, and you've got it, and then they send you home. And so we recognized from talking to other caregivers across the nation that sometimes our caregivers get home and they don't know how to take care of things. And so UC Davis, in conjunction with AARP, has been developing these videos. They range from how to give medications, how to give a suppository, how to give a subcutaneous injection, how to do general wound care, oxygen supplies, mobility, and a myriad of other things as well. This piece is easy to address. You can always find somebody willing to teach you how to do something. The harder part of caregiving, I think anyway, comes from the emotional gambit you experience, from feeling blessed that you have the time that you have, for some people feeling privileged to be able to support the person they're caring for, to days when you're afraid and feeling frustrated, feeling guilty about whether you're doing the best that you can, to feeling the weight of the ambiguity of what's to come and questioning whether you can really do it. And then some of us will feel guilty about wondering if we can really do that. The other folks are people that make promises and then feel that they can't fulfill those promises the way they intended, which adds another layer. For other people, it may be trying to care from afar, which is challenging in and of itself, and then you add COVID on top of it, and the feelings of helplessness can be overwhelming. For some of us, acknowledging that we can't do it all and asking for help, negotiating what that help looks like and accepting it when it's offered, and realizing we may have to adjust our expectations, that we can't always expect of others what we expect of ourselves. And sometimes that in and of itself is stressful. All of these things are perfectly normal. I've met very few caregivers in my 25 years of practice who walked into the office saying, I've got this, I don't need any help, I enjoy every single day, life is good, no questions. If I ever meet that person, I'm going to make them sit down and tell me exactly what they did. I know for myself, my parents were my best friends, and I would do anything for them, but it didn't make it any easier. And knowing everything that I know about caregiving, I still found myself thinking, wow, I know that I've sat and I've said, just do this. And when I tried to just do this, with all the knowledge and all the resources I had, it was challenging. And so part of my commitment to caregivers is to help minimize those challenges. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of anticipatory loss. It's the anticipation of the loss before it happens. And then the pieces, as you lose people you care about a little bit at a time, that loss of independence, that loss of the next step. When people actually pass, there's a very definitive stopping point from which recovery begins. When we're losing people a little bit at a time, it can be much more challenging. You still go through all of the same phases, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, and the acceptance, and you're not alone. The person that you're caring for also experiences that. And so it's almost like a dual integration. One is interdependent upon the other as far as, do we both hit denial and anger at the same time? Is that staggered? Is somebody ahead of the other where they're feeling better and they've hit acceptance so they can actually help? It's a very challenging dynamic to experience. Another component is that anticipatory loss is mixed with hope. Hope that the person will live longer, hope they won't suffer, hope that things will be a little better tomorrow, and that can contribute to the up and down nature of the grieving that happens with anticipatory loss. But studies have shown us that anticipatory loss is actually helpful to us because it helps us to focus on what's important and address the unresolved issues. Right? We realize that we only have a limited amount of time, and so not to leave things unresolved. It helps us find meaning in things that we may not have ever thought about being meaningful. It allows us to achieve closure and to feel at peace. So what does anticipatory loss look like in the throes of things? Part of it is the depression that can come. So that sadness, the anxiety, feeling sort of empty for more than 2 weeks at a time, fatigue and restlessness, or insomnia, or conversely, oversleeping. Some people experience actual physical pain. You may have anxiety, so those feelings of tension and worry, or find that you're more irritable or quick to anger. You may have increased concern and worry. I can attest this is where I went. That sort of hypervigilance that I would go through as I lost them a piece at a time. Every time I lost a piece, I would suddenly be like Johnny on the spot for everything and drive them mildly insane with that whole concept of me hovering every 2 seconds. So recognizing that that is very much a symptom of anticipatory loss and being able to put it into perspective. You may find that you cry at the drop of a hat, you'll be afraid, feel lonely. Oftentimes an insatiable need to talk about what's happening is very common here. And then sometimes people feel guilt, feeling like I'm not enough. But the wonder of anticipatory loss and the way to kind of focus all of that emotion and what can be sort of incapacitating for moments in time are to focus on quality of life. Make sure that you have a good support network, someone that you can call and talk about what you're actually feeling. Take the time to connect with each other. If you're feeling it, the person you're caring for may be feeling it. And so maybe this is a time to talk about what that actually feels like and to be open and honest with each other. Addressing any unresolved issues that are lurking in the back of your mind. Thinking about what are those legal and financial matters that we need to be sure are taken care of and resolved. Do we need professional support? Someone said these words to me once, and I always have hung on to them because, in my family growing up, we had what happened in the family stayed in the family. And so when you talked about reaching out for professional support, somehow that translated to not meeting the bar, right? So someone actually said to me, think of professional support as a gift you give yourself. Because sometimes having a voice that isn't a voice that has anything else to do with any part of your life is the safest space to investigate and talk about emotions that you may worry would be misinterpreted if you talk to anybody else about them. And then we also know from studies that helping our loved ones adjust actually helps us adjust. So when you're not in the anticipatory loss phase and you're just doing your day-to-day, sometimes that can become overwhelming for whatever reason, and you need a set of strategies to kind of attack those moments when you actually need to cope with the frustration that's happening, or you just need that 5 minutes of centering. Many times when we think about coping, we think that we need this big chunk of time to recharge. But really, if you take 5 minutes and just recenter yourself, it might be 5 minutes of meditation, or closing your eyes and going to your happy place, or listening to a favorite song, reading a favorite passage, taking time in the garden and not doing it from the standpoint of, oh my goodness, I need to get out there and weed, but what's the sun feel like on my face? What's the dirt smell like? What's the fresh air smell like? Or even sitting in front of the window when the sun's coming in and there's warmth to it and the birds are chirping, and you just take a moment to connect with your surroundings. Even the rhythm of a ventilator can be a source of comfort. So just taking, the few minutes and closing your eyes and listening to that steady rhythm of that breathing can be a good source for recentering. Reminiscing about times where you had joyful encounters, or you laughed at the silliest things, or you learned some life lesson together where you think there is no other way we would have survived that, and wow, that's done us wonders moving forward. And don't forget to use your resources. Right? The ALS Association has a plethora of resources. If you're in the Gold Country counties, the Laurel Caregiving Resources is another good source. They offer free services for respite, for consultation, for finances and legal matters. So definitely a good resource. There are agencies like that throughout the state and throughout the nation. So connecting with those resources if you need them can be most helpful. And then, how is it that you can be the flower in the middle of the concrete, pushing its way through and surviving with grace and beauty? So for me, that's what it means to be resilient. It's how you find the strengths that you didn't know that you had. And so when you look at the literature and you look at the folks who have done an exceeding amount of work in this area, try to understand what is it that people who are resilient have. What are those little nuggets that are important to think about that recharge us? One of them is looking at difficulty as a challenge as opposed to a deficit. Being committed, that tenacity to keep going. And then probably the hardest one for most people is recognizing what we have control over and what we don't. And then the true trick, being able to let go of what we don't control. Taking the only thing that we really have for personal control in some situations is how we choose to respond to the situation. So looking at those things and thinking to yourself, how am I doing that? How do I respond to those challenges? Am I trying to control something over which I have no control? The running joke in my house was when I felt out of control, I had to do the dishes and they had to be done in a certain way. And then I was fine. So now when I'm looking like I need control, people actually put dishwater in the sink and suggest that I wash dishes. So everybody has their way of finding a path. So when you think about enhancing resilience, because when you're in this for the long haul, sometimes your resilience ebbs, right? And you may find yourself along the continuum, maybe even decompensating and then coping and then thriving and then coping, sort of weaving back and forth in a fluid motion along the whole continuum of resilience and decompensation. So what you're really looking for here is what are those things that when your landscape is threatened and you're relying on that inner resilience to cope so that you avoid feeling unprepared, overwhelmed, and stressed, as you encounter change, what is it that I can do to enhance my resilience? For the long distance caregiver, you might be going along beautifully and suddenly in the landscape, COVID happens and you're not seeing people, right? You can't, if they're in a facility, you aren't able to go in and physically visit with them because of the safety measures that are in place. And so sometimes there's this feeling of isolation and things that we would normally be resilient and bounce back from, we're being even more challenged. And so how do you deal with that? So here are some tips for things that you might think about doing. So one of the things is to remember to celebrate your small victories. Sometimes that victory might be, I got out of bed this morning when it was the last thing I wanted to do. Or, we set this goal to get all your medicines in by 9 o'clock in the morning, and today we did it. It may simply be, I had a moment and I took a breath. Creating learning opportunities, reflecting on performance and challenges and responses, and figuring out if it didn't work the way you thought it was going to, how do I learn from that? How do I figure out another approach for next time? Look for small challenges that push you, but don't stress you. So delicate balance. Be resourceful. Learn what to ask. Learn when to ask. Learn how to broaden your perspective from other people. Grant yourself permission to fail. I liken caregiving very much to the role of a parent. Nobody hands you the parenting manual with all situations and all responses. And for those of you that have been parents, you know that you don't do it right all the time. Right? Caregiving, you don't do it right all the time. You do the very best you can with the information and the abilities that you have at the time. The important piece is that you don't give up. Right? Recognize you don't have to do it all. Right? Some of you may have made the promise never to use nursing home or assisted living services. I made that promise. I was able to keep that promise with my mom, but not with my dad. I needed help with him. And I had to reconcile the promise I made and think about what that promise really was about. Was it about not using assisted living, or was it about not abandoning him? You know, and really, truly, my promise was not putting you in a home and then leaving you and never being able to follow up and make sure that you're being taken care of the way I'd like you to be taken care of. And so, you know, allaying the fear that somehow you're going to mysteriously disappear from their life if you need to use services because you can't do it all, or you've tried to do it all and you're exhausted and you're doing yourself more harm. Your blood pressure's going up. You're getting chest pain. You're getting aches and pains you've never had before. It may be time to ask for help and use additional services. The promise you made is really, I won't desert you. I want to be your wife, your husband, your daughter, your son, your friend, and I need help to be able to do that because I can't meet the physical demands anymore, but I want to be there for you. So hopefully this is helpful to you, and I know that we have the ability to ask questions, bounce things off of each other here over the next few minutes. And so I'd like to open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sexson. Really appreciate it. It was wonderful information. I think lots of us really took something from this. If you want, you can stop sharing unless you have other slides, and then we have a few questions we'll ask.
Nope, I'm happy to stop sharing here.
Super. Wonderful. Something you addressed, Dr. Sexson, is just kind of balancing caregiving and looking at hiring somebody outside the home. We have a question about how to do that. Balance of my caregiving as a spouse and hiring someone part-time. He says, my wife was diagnosed 19 months ago with bulbar form of ALS. I've been a caregiver and I'm loath to give up even a little, even though I understand the reason very well. So if you wouldn't mind just maybe addressing just how to balance, if that's possible, balance that just a little.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the hardest things to do, especially I can wholeheartedly relate to loath to give any of it up, but also knowing the importance of doing that. So there are different ways to hire someone to come into the home. Some agencies require a minimum number of hours. Some will provide respite services, so you can take smaller chunks of time.
Sure.
Frequently, what I found, at least in practice, is that usually it's about a 3 to 4 hour window for the minimum.
Yeah, right.
You know, and then figuring out what is the help that you need. Right? Is it that you need chore service help? Is it that you need somebody to help prepare meals? Is it that you need help taking care of your spouse or your loved one? Right? So is it that you need help with bathing? Is it that you need help with dressing? Is it a combination of those things? You can hire individually or you can hire through an agency.
Right.
I usually am recommending that people hire through an agency, and that's a very personal choice as to whether you do agency or direct hire. I just find that with direct hires, you have the responsibility of payroll taxes and workers' comp and some of those components that I find usually circumvent the whole reason for having someone help you.
Right.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
get rid of more instead of less. And so with agencies, they're required to do background checks, so you have a much better sense of there's not this big criminal history that is lurking in the background. They haven't abused anybody, so that piece is taken off the plate. The agency is responsible for paying them. The other nice advantage of agencies is 90% of the time, if somebody were to suddenly call in, and especially now say, I think I have symptoms of COVID, I don't think I should come to work today,
Right.
the agency will look for a replacement as opposed, when you're doing it all by yourself, then you are all by yourself.
Right.
So,
Sure.
So those are things to think about and consider when you're trying to make those decisions.
Thank you. Those are great tips. That makes a lot of sense. I know we've received a couple of questions around how to maybe find a caregiver if you are looking for someone perhaps individually, how to find a counselor on the therapy side of it. I just want to say out loud, if you are working with one of our care managers in the Golden West chapter territory, they can help assist in this and provide some guidance and some referrals for folks in both of those areas with regard to therapy and with regard to home care too. So just wanted to say that out loud for people who have asked about that. You addressed this just a bit, Dr. Sexson. There's a question saying, my sister has ALS, but we as her family live out of state. How do we handle it during times when she might be depressed and goes negative? How do we support her? And how do we take care of ourselves and our emotions? You addressed that a bit in terms of the taking care of yourselves. It's tricky when you're out of state and far away and trying to help this person. Any ideas around that?
So first of all, if you can do Zoom or Skype or FaceTime so that you get an actual face-to-face with them, that can be very helpful, especially if they're not getting a lot of interaction with other people. Just sometimes seeing a family member can be recharging, can make them feel connected and loved. Meet them where they are, right? It's okay to have days where you're depressed. This is not an easy disease. This is one of the most challenging diseases to have. And you're going to have days where you rock the world, and there are days where the world rocks you. And being able to say, wow, I really hear you're having a hard time today.
Mm-hmm.
How can I help?
Mm-hmm.
And it may simply be, I just need to vent. I don't need you to fix it for me. I just need to talk through what I'm feeling. And that can be very, very helpful for folks. One of the things that we have a tendency to do is to go to sympathy instead of empathy. Sympathy is where you go, yep, it's really dark down there. Right? I know that's a really dark place, right? As opposed to, I can hear you. I can understand. I don't know what to say, but know that I'm here for you.
Right. Just that shoulder, that sounding board, I think sometimes right in the moment, in the thick of it, can be really helpful. That's great.
The other thing,
Yeah.
Audra, that I would say is if you have someone that you're trying to sort of shift out of that negative vortex, that it's really super easy to get sucked into,
Right.
is to talk about, what are the things that you're grateful for?
Sure.
You might want to think about recording things that you're grateful for each day, whether that's, audio recording or writing it in a journal where, it might be something as simple as I'm grateful I woke up this morning.
Yeah.
And then when you're having those bad days, being able to go back and go through that gratefulness journal, and it helps you remember what are those really kind of special moments in each day that I've identified, and that can help people sort of frame shift.
Great. No, that's super helpful. Related to that, there's a question saying, my father is the sole caregiver of my mother, and he also works full time. I'd appreciate advice on how to support the caregiver when they have a hard time asking for help and being transparent in my mother's care. So if you're working full time and juggling all of it, and it shows with your other family members that you're struggling, but it's hard to ask for help.
So what I generally recommend when families come to me with that scenario is I'll say, one of the things that can be really helpful, let's say, Audra, you were my family member and I saw that you were struggling. I might say, Audra, it would make me feel so good to be able to do something. I've been feeling really helpless. Would it be okay with you if I fixed dinner tomorrow night and brought it over? Or I'm going to the grocery store and I know that you might need a couple of things. I know you like to do the full trip, but are there some things I can bring to tide you over? Or I'd really like to come and sit with Mom. I'm missing some time with Mom. Would that be okay with you?
Right.
So it's about you and what you need. And most of the time when it's not presented as, I can see you need help.
Right.
Because how that gets heard is, I'm not doing a good enough job.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, I should feel terrible about what I'm doing.
Right.
And then we start loading stuff on ourselves that was never the intent of the comment.
Yeah.
So if you can frame it from your perspective and how that help is helping. Now in COVID, one of the things I've found is that a lot of DoorDash is happening these days where people order meals from the restaurant and have it delivered. Any things like that. Or the other thing that has worked really well is if there's like a list that you can come up with as a family of these are things that would be really helpful.
Exactly.
And so when I see that you're struggling, I can go, oh, list A, item 3, this might be the best time to do that. So that it's sort of like pre-made so you don't have to think of what to do.
That's right. I like that. I like the specifics of saying, let me do X, Y, Z to help you instead of saying, can I help you? That's a little bit more general, whereas sometimes people say, I'm okay, I got this, right? If you can be specific, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other thing, when you just say, can I help you? If a caregiver is at that precipice where a little bit more it'd be just enough to push them over, they can't think of what you could do to help them.
Right. That's right.
It's too big. So
Right.
if you can be concrete, that oftentimes is exceedingly well received.
Right. Do you think there's a general rule around when is it time to hire additional help? How do you know it's time? We have a question about that. How do you know it's time to hire additional help? And that sounds like such a personal thing, a case-by-case thing, but we have somebody asking that.
So this is actually where my research has been, is that sort of what is that transition point? And it is very personal and very, it varies from family to family about when that time might be, but things that we sort of have identified as key points to be thinking about. Is it time? When you find that you're experiencing more frustration in your day than you are reward, right? Where you feel, you hear yourself lashing out and you think, who in the world is that? And I so didn't mean to do that. Where you know that you're emotionally being spent. Or you go to see your provider and your blood pressure that's been lovely at 115 over 72 for decades is suddenly 160 over 85. You're starting to see some of those health effects. It might be time to ask for help. Right? And for everybody, that's really individual. So like for me, I'm a whopping 4'10". My husband is 6 feet. So, and he's older than me, so I'm pretty much guessing that I'm going to be in the caregiving shoes again at some point in my lifetime. But I'm going to need help if he gets to the point where I need to physically move him. My leverage point just won't be there. And so that may be a time for me where I go, there's certain times a day where having help would be really a good idea. And so gauging, you don't want to hurt yourself, because if you hurt yourself either emotionally or physically, you can't be there for them.
That's right.
Yeah. So those are my best suggestions.
They're wonderful suggestions. Wonderful. Perfect. Do you have suggestions on how do you deal with the holidays, trying to support and be with family during COVID and being safe while trying and wanting to spend time with the ones you love? Tricky. Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom is a great option. Masking and socially distancing, but being really cognizant. If you have someone who is at higher risk, using both the face shield and a mask will reduce, because we get virus through our mucous membranes in our eyes as well as the respiratory tract. And so that can be a way to do that. When you eat together is probably the most challenging time. And if you have somebody who is immunocompromised, I wouldn't go there, because people have to take their masks off to eat. And as much as I would love to believe that we all know what 6 feet looks like, we don't.
Especially when you haven't seen each other for a while, you want to gather.
Yep, everybody wants to hug, everybody wants to touch. I mean, that's our nature. And so if like I know I'm a hugger, so for me, Zoom is a much better plan, because I will inevitably violate my 6 foot space before I go, oops, nope, sorry, can't do that. And I'll do a virtual hug.
Sure.
But, Zoom is great. Skype is good. FaceTime is good. Any of those, remote connection capacities are good resources during this time. Celebrating, telling stories. I know folks go, what do you do on Zoom? We all sit in our little boxes and we stare at each other. So it's sort of like throwing the party where people don't know each other. What are the icebreaker kind of things that you do? Audra, what was your favorite Thanksgiving? And then you go around the Brady Bunch and pretty soon people are laughing and joking and it's like you're right there together.
Right. It's a close second. Yeah. As best as we can do right now. Couple of other things. This one's interesting. Do you have suggestions on how to find a purpose or feeling your value when you think you've exhausted your purpose and your loved one's purpose?
Oh my.
That one's it's tricky.
That's a tough question. You know, finding purpose and hanging on to purpose, I would say, is something, I'm a big proponent of journaling, and to really stop and think about, if I could do nothing else, what would be the one thing that I would really want to do? What would bring me joy? And start there.
Right.
And oftentimes you find that is your purpose. With people who have cognitive change, I often talk with them about the fact that they are still teaching lessons to their family. So, they teach us patience. They teach us what it means to truly be family, to be there for each other no matter what. They teach us what it means to not give up. And sometimes it's as simple as saying those words to someone to realize that they haven't lost their purpose, that they're still giving, that they're still an important part of our lives, can be life-changing for them.
Sure.
So I'll give that one some more thought. And if I think of anything additional, I'll send you an email, Audra, that you could share with that person.
That was a great.
That's a hard space to be.
That's tough. And tough to answer on the spot. You didn't have that one ahead of time. What should I do when my loved one with ALS doesn't want the services that are being offered? I'm trying to be proactive, but he thinks it's giving up. So maybe it's, you may be offering the option of extra care, maybe, or, could be physical therapy, could be, extra type of therapy. This could mean lots of different things, new piece of medical equipment, and the person just might feel a little resistant to that.
Yep, and I think that you find that around that feeling of loss, right? So when I add a piece of equipment to help, it means I'm not able to do it anymore. So sometimes you get in that, he thinks it's giving up, right? To use something, how I try to frame it, and you will definitely have to come at this from about 40 different angles, because what works for one person may not work for the next person. But what I try to frame it, because in reality, when I offer a piece of equipment to somebody, what I'm actually saying is, I want you to be as independent as you can for as long as you can. And it may mean that you're less independent than you were when you were up walking around and doing everything on your own, but this will help you be more independent. It's like when you give a life alert and people automatically go to the world of, I'm old, you think I'm frail, you think I'm gonna,
Sure.
That's not me. But if you did fall and you were home alone, if you could alert me, then you can be home alone. If you can't alert me, then we start getting in that safety component.
Sure.
And that's when all the things that you really don't want to happen.
Right.
So if you can frame new equipment as being part of the solution to help them maintain a quality of life for as long as they can maintain a quality of life.
Right.
Many times people are able to receive it that way. Yeah. And I'm happy to talk one-on-one to brainstorm that one. If somebody wants to reach out, I think you have my contact information, Audra. I'm happy for you to share that if somebody just wants to do a little brainstorming.
Oh, thank you. And related to that, Dr. Sexson, we've had a couple of questions. If you're comfortable with me sharing this presentation with the group afterward? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Wonderful. I just wanted to make sure of that too. So for those who asked about that, I'm happy to pass that along. So boy, this is a tough one. Related to COVID and the holidays and wanting to be with your loved ones. She asks if we know our family members high risk, but this could be our last holiday time period together. Should we consider risk versus reward? If we get tested and we're all safe beforehand, she says, we're trying to figure this out amongst our family right now. Boy, tricky.
Yeah. So, only you can truly make that call. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have thought about the ways that you might do that to minimize the risk as much as possible. And then if you got tested beforehand and everybody's negative and you've, essentially self-quarantined before going over and you're masked and you're socially distanced, that would be the best that you could do. And then, the other piece to think about is, heaven forbid, they get COVID-19. Are you all okay with that? Is that risk worth getting together? And that's a very personal choice. For some people, that answer, when I read that scenario, if it were my family, that would be a really tough call for me. It may very well be worth it, mm-hmm. or it may not. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. I wish I could give you a definitive, but
yeah,
we don't have that crystal ball yet.
Right. Personal family decision for sure on that one. The last question I have is a little bit related to something you answered before, just in terms of living far away. How can you help a caregiver who lives pretty far away and doesn't ask for help? My dad works full-time and he's a full-time caregiver. There are 3 of us kids who want to help, but we're apart due to where we all live. And because of COVID, we can't get to see them too often. Are there things a caregiver needs that we may not know about? I think they're wondering, are there things that they could maybe offer for their dad being far away? It's some of the things you already suggested, but any other thoughts about that?
So, there, of course, are the meals and grocery deliveries, and if not hooked into respite, sometimes getting together and pooling resources for a respite, that can be a godsend for people who are doing everything full-time. Just trying to think from a distance what other things, sometimes simply giving the phone call and saying, I just wanted to talk and touch base and see how you're doing. And, I bet everything's going fairly well, especially, I know if I had called one of my parents, I would have gotten everything's fine.
Yeah.
The world could have been falling apart, but everything is fine.
Right.
Right. And so kind of feeling them out, and like we talked about earlier, giving some concrete options of, gosh, would it be helpful if we did this?
Right.
Would you like 4 hours of respite? Would you like to just be able to go for a walk and not have to worry while you were gone?
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. The last question I have here is suggestions on how to talk to my husband when I need a break and him not to feel hurt. He often doesn't like it when I go out without him.
Yeah, that can be really, really tough. Because it's not that you're saying that you don't love them, that you don't want to spend time with them. it's saying before this, we weren't together 24/7.
Right.
And, you know, as much as I would love to believe that I can supply every need that you have, I know I can't.
Right.
Okay? I know that I need to change my scenery. I want to be here for you. I love you. I want to be with you. But I also need to recharge myself a bit. And that means I just need to take some time for me. It has nothing to do with you.
Right.
It's all to do with me and where my resilience is right now.
Right. Right. And it's to your point too earlier, I think that as a caregiver, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's at some point will be difficult to continue to provide the best care for your person as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I do not see any more questions unless anyone chats something in the last minute. This has been wonderful, Dr. Sexson. Thank you so much for taking the time and being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I just hope that some of the pearls hit home for folks and that it does make their life a little bit easier. It's a hard road. It can be a very rewarding journey. A lot of times you don't recognize that in the throes of it, but on the other side, you can really see what a blessing it has been to be able to be there with your loved one. So hang in there, keep working to keep yourself healthy and well, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, there are many, many people out there who want to help, and we're never a burden. Oftentimes you find that when you ask for help, people go, oh my goodness, I have just been waiting for you to do that.
Right, that's right.
So don't be afraid to ask.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for your time and your commitment to our chapter, to the ALS community. And I want to thank everybody who participated tonight for all of your important questions. It was all great. We hope we answered everything for you. Please join us virtually at Thursday, November 19th at 5:30. We have our annual Champions for Cures and Care event. This is going to be an inspirational evening to celebrate our ALS community and recognize extraordinary individuals and organizations whose heroic efforts are accelerating the search for effective treatments and cures for ALS. It's an exclusive event that'll be broadcast directly to you and will feature exciting online silent and live auctions, special guest appearances, musical performances, and presentation of the Golden West Chapter's highest honors, the ESSE Awards. For more information or to register, please visit www.alschampions.org. And I just want to say thank you once again to the Morris Family Caregiving Initiative for generously supporting this type of programming. Our programs are made possible by individuals and families, foundations, and companies who care deeply about the ALS community. Your generous support fuels absolutely everything we do, and everything we do advances the search for effective treatments and a cure for ALS. If you too would like to support the Golden West chapter, please consider making a donation today at give.alsogoldenwest.org. And please watch for a short survey on tonight's presentation that you'll receive via email to help us plan for future programs like this one. Thanks again and have a great night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.